Okay. So today's subject is called word magic. All right. And this is a big deal because the words we use, the metaphors we use, the stories we tell ourselves inside our own head can weaken us or strengthen us. And very few people pay attention to this dynamic. So we want to be able to develop greater awareness of the hidden transformational magic of words. That's why I call it word magic. So we want to increase strength, motivation, and determination through better word choices and almost do like a detox on those words, terms, metaphors that weaken us, that make us feel more overwhelmed, more exhausted, that make things seem more hopeless. We want to avoid that unnecessarily dramatic language. Because here's the thing, true or false? The language we use can intensify negative emotion. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the language we use can really influence how we experience life. We tend to develop beliefs that are associated and emotions that are associated with the metaphors we use, for example. Like if you say somebody stabbed you in the back, you start to get worked up as though they actually did, when really they just waved at your ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend. They didn't stab you in the back, right? Like, but people can get so worked up as if these things are true, right? So changing the wording we use can instantly improve how we think, how we feel, and how we experience life, okay? And inner strength leads to outer strength. So if you want to be empowered in your life, you've got to start doing this work on the inside to make yourself strong. And it's not going to help you if you're describing reality to yourself in a way that takes away your power. All right. So we want to be able to use strategic vocabulary to break out of negative emotions, negative patterns, and produce better thoughts and feelings that can open us up to a better life. Okay. Any thoughts on this subject or topic?
I think this is something, especially through the person I was married to, that I struggled with a lot, because he used to always translate into, when someone does this, this is what it means, so he was very big as far as assigning meaning to something instead of just letting something stand on its own. And it's certainly something I struggled with. I mean, one of the things I shared last week, when I broke my arm, I was staying with my friend at the time. And, I could not have had a better, which sounds weird to say, a better experience as far as someone looking after me and taking care of me in that moment when all of that stuff happened. And I stayed there an extra couple days, took me to my house, made sure my house was okay, before I had to go home. And he was getting ready to leave on a trip, checked on me the day I had my surgery, made sure all that went fine, and then did not ask a single thing about my arm because he was on this trip. He checked in with me every day, but never asked about my arm. And when he came back, the first thing he asked me was, "How's your arm?" And I was upset. I'm just like, you don't get to check on me now. I mean, you went this whole time you were gone. You didn't ask about my arm the whole time you were gone. What makes you think you can check on it now? You either care or you don't. You can't play this middle game. But again, that came from, that past relationship. And it's kind of like, people have to be all in or they're all out. And I have a hard time sometimes. And really, when I brought that to him, he gave me the best response. And he said, the thing is, he said, I knew your physical needs were being cared for because my sister-in-law and my niece were there taking care of me. So he felt like he didn't have to own that in that moment. And it was hard to argue with. But it's one of those things, I need a reminder, I can't assign meaning to something, and that's that kind of thing. Whenever I'm saying, well, you didn't ask about it, so you don't care. I don't get to say that, or I shouldn't say that. Right. But that was an example I gave last week.
So good. And what we might tell ourselves there is, we might tell ourselves people don't care. But in reality, people trust that we are already cared for and supported.
Yeah.
It's two different ways of describing reality through the word choices we're using in our heads. But if we think people don't care, then we think this person has let me down. This person has betrayed me. And then we can get worked up when it's like, really, no, they could see I was taken care of and I was fine, right? Like, that's not what's going on at all. Joel, any thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, I mean, even back to like my spiritual foundation, like it's on a daily basis, there's always suggestions that come into thought that are all over the place. I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, you're feeling a little sniffly. I wonder what that's from. Or it's like, hey, this person did, like, what Charmaine was saying, like maybe there's an expectation for something. And in reality, it's completely different than what you're thinking. But, I've had that same experience where, an expectation isn't met and then you fabricate this whole thing, which, to go back to why it's so important to what you choose to focus on word wise, or even as you talk to yourself. Just one of the things that Tony Robbins talks about that has been really helpful for me, trade your expectations for appreciation. So a lot of times when I find myself in that place, I'll just start getting into a place of gratitude, and that just like wipes it away. But yeah, that's our whole experience. Whatever we focus on is where we're going to be spending our energy. So if we're focusing on like, oh man, I can't do this right. I can't do this right. Then it's like, of course, I'm not going to be able to do it right because I'm convincing myself. Or like, I'm not capable. Whatever it is, I'm not, in any host of health challenges, which is obviously a thing these days with the, capabilities, with is it relationships. Like I can't have a relationship right now. I'm not prepared for a relationship right now. Like whatever you talk to yourself is where you move towards, or you're like, I've got this, or it's getting in every day, in every way, it's getting easier and easier. Like whatever we turn our sight on, that's where we end up. So yeah, it's you could make the case that there isn't a bigger topic to cover than this one.
Excellent. Now, you brought up a really good common example in which an expectation isn't met. So a lot of times when our expectation isn't met by other people, we get frustrated or annoyed. We might have clients come into the facility and they're not reading the signs. We might have people in a public space aren't following the rules that we're all following. It could be anything. And we could we could tell ourselves, I'm so frustrated, I'm so annoyed. But instead of telling ourselves we're frustrated or annoyed, we could instead be fascinated and be like, wow, that person still doesn't follow the rules. They've been told, there's clearly signage there. I wonder what makes people do what they do, right? I wonder what it's like to be them and just ignore all the rules that the rest of us are following, right? So that helps us develop a level of maturity in which we are relating to the realities of other people. Because a lot of times we get frustrated and annoyed when we judge that everybody experiences consensus reality from the same vantage point we do, right? So, but all we're doing there is changing it from frustrated to fascinated. I'm not going to tell myself I'm frustrated. I'm going to tell myself I'm fascinated. And then my brain is going to go along that thought flow. We could say, here's another one that's very common these days. People are saying, with the pandemic, I'm devastated by all of these rules and regulations affecting my business. I am hugely disappointed by these lockdowns. So we got terms like devastated, hugely disappointed. We could tone it down. We could just say, I'm inconvenienced by this. Done. Inconvenienced, all of a sudden, even just saying inconvenience, it's true. But using that terminology, we keep more of our power than just giving it all away using this extremely dramatic language, right?
How about things will never go back to the way they were before? Never, right? There's been pandemics before, right?
Yeah. And I'd say they don't have to go back to the way they were before. They can get better. Things can go in a better direction, right? So a lot of times people will say, I have to do online meetings right now for work. Well, we can change it. Instead of I have to, how about I get to do online meetings right now for work? Simple change in the wording can make a big difference. Here's one. Somebody might say, I hate country music. And when they say that, you can visibly see people get worked up. But they could also just say, country music is not my favorite. All of a sudden, they don't seem so negatively affected by it. By the way, I like country music, so that's nothing personal to anybody, but I'm just giving an example of how people might share their opinion in a
That's
way that visibly rocks them, right?
That's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So here's where we're going to take this next. Being a leader means being a thought leader. Okay. So we need to help give people thoughts that give them more strength. Because if we allow people around us to get too disempowered, it can dampen their enthusiasm to do the progressive things in life. They might indulge in hopelessness and give up easier, especially at this time. You see a lot of it. Like there's a lot of realistic challenges that are bringing people to their knees out there, you know? So we want to think about how we might be able to coach other people out of this. Okay. I find it's easier to start off from like a coaching perspective on this subject. First thing we want to do is we want to consider three things. If you're going to try to help somebody optimize the words, the metaphors, what they tell themselves, all of this stuff, word magic, you want to think, one, would it be helpful for this person? Always ask yourself, like, would this be helpful? Sometimes the answer might be no for various reasons. Okay. Two, are they receptive? You know, a lot of times people hinge language to self-identity. So they think, I gotta be me. I gotta swear. I can't not swear. You know, like I promised myself I'd stay true to myself. Swearing and talking like this is me, right? But meanwhile, no, it's technically, it's not you. It's the language you're using, but you can change your language anytime you want. You are the one that adopted this pattern, but you can change this pattern for another pattern because that's what you really are. But if you tell yourself this is you, you'll forever be enslaved by it, right? And then the other question I would consider is this a good time to help somebody out with this? Because when people are currently like really angry, they can become like that kind of really worked up emotion abhors reason. People become extremely irrational when they're angry. So they almost get offended that you're trying to take them out of anger. They're like, no, I'm miserable and I want to stay that way right now. Like it's kind of like, so it might be better to wait for a calm time to bring it to their attention. So you want to kind of feel out those things. You know, would it be helpful? Would they be receptive to this? Is it a good time? Okay. So
what's a case where it's not helpful? I'm trying to understand that better.
It might be in an emergency, right? Like, let's say an emergency happens right away. Somebody gets into a car accident right away and they swear. Like, this is not going to be helpful to try to correct them on their language because they have different priorities in the moment, right? In fact,
isn't that about timing then, though?
Yeah, that could be timing, and that could just be that it's not going to help the situation.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, could be anything like that. I mean, and in general, you're going to get some people who are just do not want to change. Right. So anyway,
that's not receptive. But I understand. But I think what you're saying really is sometimes too, if they were in an accident, their behavior might be completely different than their normal behavior. It's just isolated to that particular event. So it might even be something that doesn't need to be discussed, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
One that's exactly. the one that I've been noticing a lot lately, especially with like the newer generation, is the middle one about identifying with things. Like I've noticed a lot of people these days are like, well, that's just me, and if you don't like it, move on. And it almost seems like it's a cop-out, like that they never have to change. They just identify with what they want to choose to identify with, and there's never a need to change it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is traditionally considered the 7 deadly sin of sloth. And it all comes down to this. People would rather moan and complain about everything that's wrong in the world while they are constantly trying to avoid the thing that everybody is trying to avoid, which is their own personal self-improvement, right? And so I think that a lot of times comes down to mental laziness. That's just me. Well, that's just the way I am. And it's like, well, technically, no, like you can change, but people become psychological antiques or psychologically fossilized. And so, I mean, the truth is, like, people have the ability to get better. A lot of people just don't want to. They just don't think it's a good idea to change. They think, so, but we've all done that, I think. So it's like, as I'm saying this, I can relate to earlier versions of myself wanting to be a certain way, even though it seemed like a good idea at the time. I just wasn't done my experiment with living that way, right? So let's go into an example where we might help somebody correct their language, right? Let's say somebody says, I'm furious or I'm enraged. How could you tone it down with a different word choice? What kind of word choice would you suggest for somebody instead of saying I'm furious or I'm enraged?
I always like the one Tony Robbins uses of I'm peeved. I'm a little peeved.
Perfect. Yeah.
Something
I
that's
like irked.
self-deprecating, comical.
What did you say, Charmaine?
I like irked.
I'm irked. Yeah. You could also say, I like to say I'm a little tickled about this.
That's a good one.
Because if you say you're tickled, it brings a little joy to you and the person you're with, right? You could just say I'm a smidge cranky, I'm a tad out of sorts. Like there's lots of different things we could say, but saying like the term furious is an emotionally charged term. The minute you do it, it emotionally charges you in a way that you kind of lose that kind of, you can sometimes lose your perspective, right?
I like feeling a little cross too.
Feeling a little cross. That one's actually cute. It just makes me think of a little tiny crucifix. Right. And I love how you also said feeling a little, right? Because that actually brings it down. Excellent. So that's example one. We're going to go on to example two. Example two, instead of saying I'm depressed, what else could you tell yourself? What could be a different term to use instead of depressed?
Just say I'm a little tired, or I need something that gets to a micro aspect of it.
Yeah, you could say I'm a wee bit down, right?
Like you need a break. You just need to kind of take a break from things.
You could say I'm in recovery mode. I'm recharging. You could say I'm preparing to perk myself up.
Recharging the batteries. I like that.
Yeah, you could say I felt better. So you could say any of these things to tone it down. Right? Perfect. Now let's
need an attitude adjustment.
Here you go. Let's go on to another example, okay? Let's say you were to ask somebody out on a date and they said no. Instead of saying I got rejected, you could also use this for applying for a job or anything else. Instead of saying I got rejected, instead of using that term rejected, what else might we say that could really put a different spin on it?
Well, I always think of Edison inventing the light bulbs, and he always said, I found one more way not to make a light bulb, but I found something else that's really interesting. So it's like I found a relationship that wasn't meant to be, but I learned something, or it's guiding me in the place that I need to be.
Yeah. So I love that, because you could just say I discovered something, right? Like I'm not in being rejected mode. I'm in discovery mode, right? Like, Charmaine, any thoughts on this one? This one's a bit trickier. I started you guys out with some easy ones, but this one's a bit trickier to help somebody change their language, because I have stopped people dead in their tracks when they use that term, and I've offered up a better suggestion, and every time I can think of it, they took the suggestion instead. But I just said, whoa, you weren't rejected, you were, and then I'll just fill in with a different term. Charmaine, do you have any thoughts on this one? What might we say instead of rejected?
I've got a phrase that's coming into mind, but it's not really a term like that. But I'm just thinking like nothing ventured, nothing gained, because then you're celebrating that you at least took action.
Yeah. You could just say, yeah. You could just say, I gained insight and understanding. Or you could just say, I gained some wisdom, right? I like to say with this one, because I'm a big fan of getting things to rhyme, because it gets people to remember it. So I just say, you weren't rejected, you were deflected to where you really belong. Okay. And now you've got wisdom and insight and experience. So you gotta whether it was Edison, you got deflected and deflected and deflected until you figured out the way to invent the light bulb, perhaps, or whether it's in any dating situation, you're getting rejected. You're not getting rejected. You're getting deflected over and over again until you figure out where you fit. Right?
You won't be wasting your time there. I'm imagining this pinball machine and you're getting bounced around, like trying to get to the target.
I would even use that term. I got bounced. Let's see where I go next. Let's see where I end up next. I mean, if I just say,
redirected.
I girl out and I got bounced. Like because the immediate thing is you think of a bounce back, right? So I love that term. I think you nailed it with that one, Charmaine.
How about redirected?
Yes, there you go. Now you nailed it because you did a rhyme. I didn't get rejected. I got redirected. Perfect. Nailed it. See how fun this is? And these terms sound way better. Okay. Here's one that really gets people down. A lot of people suffer from like back pain and shoulder pain and knee pain and all kinds of different physical ailments. Instead of saying, I'm in pain, how could we put a positive spin on it? What term or phrase might we say that lifts us up a little bit more and is a little bit more encouraging?
I always think if you're feeling, you're living, but
yeah. You could just say, you could just say, here, I don't know why, but you could just say, instead of I was in pain, you could just say I was stimulated, right? Because it's kind of, I guess that just suggests the same thing. My low back is quite stimulated right now. Right?
People say that things are talking to them, right? Like your knee is talking to you.
Yeah. My body is communicating. But you could also just say my body is giving me a message. My body's communicating that something needs help.
Yeah.
Right? You could say my body is teaching me something. My body is trying to teach me something. Right? Like we could look at pain as a teacher rather than a villain. Right? Which helps us embrace it with more curiosity. Okay. We could also say, if somebody's a little bit spiritual, then I might just say, hey, look, you're not in pain. You're just shedding karma right now. It's good. Pay it down. Like purifying your karma, putting some karmic deposits in the bank. Right? So, all right, now let's go on. Here's a different type of example we'll go into next. When somebody asks you, how are you? Right? People tend to respond in a number of very underwhelming ways. They might say, I'm so, or I can't complain. And when they do that, there's just this transfer of blah energy to the person that asked you that. And I feel like that's such a wasted opportunity to uplift somebody and bring a smile to their face and maybe bring a smile to your own face. So if somebody asks you, how are you? What are some other things we could say that might be able to just spread a little bit more joy than I'm so, I'm fine, or I can't complain?
I tend to always have the same response, which is, it's another day living the dream.
Okay. Yeah. So you could just say living the dream. Excellent. That definitely narrates something hopeful and encouraging, right?
And I have noticed that people love to compare their problems. They'll ask somebody how's it going, and they'll find the thing that sucks the most for them right now. It's if their problem's bigger, they feel more significant, or I don't know. It's oh, you got that problem, I got this problem. But I agree. It's what? How does that improve anything?
Well, that gets into social identity. And a lot of times, if you hinge problems to your social identity, you have applied a failure method for happiness and empowerment. Because now you've just created a situation in which you will subconsciously very much resist a positive resolution to those problems, because now it threatens your entire identity, right? So that can be perfect. Okay, so let's go into some examples. What else could we say when somebody says, "How are you?" Charmaine, any thoughts?
Wonderful,
Great.
Gorgeous day, or there's all kinds of things,
Perfect.
Well, and the cool thing about that is it's so fun when you start doing that to see how it pull up out of the miry clay. Like you can just tell that somebody's having not the best day. You just they ask how you are. You're like, this is an awesome day. However you express that, I'm doing great. And it's like, oh really? Well, that's cool. And you can tell it lifts them up out of it. It's kind of a win-win.
What's interesting is we use language so much, to really add emotion in a negative way. But when it comes to something where you're asking how someone is, we do tend to have these pat responses. I'm okay, just fine, things like that. And we don't put any emotion into it, And sometimes, whenever I get off a call, I am so sincere in wishing everyone a good day. And it comes across with such sincerity. You can see the way it transforms the way people respond to you.
Okay, let's love it. Chris, do you want to unmute yourself and any suggestions? If somebody says, "How are you?" what are some good ways to respond that might spread joy to yourself and to them to take advantage of the opportunity?
I'm currently experiencing joyous rapture in this moment because I'm spending this time with you.
He did it. He got me to laugh. It worked. Love it. So, and you could always just say outstanding, right? A simple one, or spectacular.
Right.
You could just say, "Oh, I'm real swell," and swing your elbow, just like you're
Right.
you're from the 50s. If you just say, "I'm real swell," and you do this, for some reason, that gets people who can relate to that terminology. So,
ready for a dance party, right?
yeah, exactly. So we want to think about ways we could go from good to great wording. Instead of saying something was well done, right? You could just say that was impeccable, right? Instead of saying somebody is really honest, you could say they have integrity. Instead of saying you'll make things better, just say I'm in the pursuit of excellence, right? So you could change a lot of this terminology. Instead of saying I'm happy, I'm stoked, I'm totally ecstatic, all these different terms, we can really take it up a notch. Okay, now we're going to go into another example, and imagine you keep telling somebody, maybe it's your kids, and you're saying don't forget, and then you get them to pack their lunch or their homework or their mask and gloves or whatever for school, and they keep forgetting. Okay. What might be a better way to communicate to them instead of saying don't forget? Just remembering that when we use the term forget, it gets registered in the brain and associated to the items that you were then describing, right? So that's how it's happening on a brain level. So what might we say instead of don't forget?
Remember?
Perfect. Yeah, because now that's getting associated in the brain. The term remember is getting associated with the items that come next. Or you could say, please remember, or do your best to remember.
How awesome would it be if you did this?
That sounds very parental.
Yeah. How awesome would it be if you remembered this, right? Absolutely. Chris, any thoughts on this one?
It's really important that you do this, it's really important that you keep the ball and don't use the word fumble. They say this was one thing that during Emmett Smith's time that he had mentioned, is that during training they would say don't fumble. They never said don't fumble the ball. They said make sure to keep the ball with you. They never used that negative word, so that was never introduced into their psyche to begin with. So think about how we're
Yeah.
using words, emotions, what suggestion, priming is what these words do. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking, so instead of using don't forget, it's just like, remember, this is important to do. Remember, it's important that you get this thing done.
I will say, having a 6, 8, and 10-year-old, sometimes telling them the importance of things, they don't actually register that's important. It seems like you have to have that place of maturity to understand, oh yeah, this is important. But it seems like if you can catch them like use some new language or some way of phrasing it that they haven't heard before, or tie it to like, I don't know, something that's, hey, there's a benefit to like remembering this. Because then you'll get to school and you'll have your lunch. Wouldn't that be cool? You're like, oh, I get it now. It's tangible.
Sometimes you can turn it around where it's like, help me remember this, where you kind of include them in the event. And then because you've had that conversation differently, both people tend to remember it.
I kind of like Joel's
Remember-
angle, which is getting them to imagine the best possible outcomes. Because that's what he's done there, and that's a very strategic thing to do. Because now you're getting their subconscious mind trying to find answers around it. Like,
Well,
hey,
until
how
they get
cool
the
is it?
result that they want.
Yeah.
I will say, man, as a parent, like it really challenges you a lot. The thing I found most helpful is a program called Love and Logic, which I actually just realized something the other day about it that was really helpful to have. It's all about having empathy. Like you're on their team and you're evaluating the decisions they make. You're like, oh man, that's a bummer. You chose that way. Now it has that consequence. It's like it takes you out of it. But anyway, I'm always trying to have to come up with creative ways to address things because kids it's not like they're smart, like outsmart, like they're intentionally trying to outsmart you, but they just like eventually they start putting up walls against certain approaches and you have to like find the side door.
Yeah. Kids,
Remember, if you bring your lunch to school, your favorite superhero will be super proud of you.
it might be said that kids are educational experiences that help Joel Belmont wake up his hidden wisdom master powers, right? All right, now I have a drill for all of us, okay? I'm going to challenge everybody here to just write down to yourself, okay? You don't have to share anything. The 3 words you use on a consistent basis, 3 words or terms or metaphors, whatever you want, that might make you feel lousy, exhausted, humiliated, disappointed, bored, stressed, whatever. Now, if you're having difficulty identifying any of this stuff, just ask yourself what negative feelings you experience on a consistent basis. And then what we'll do is we'll go into examples of how to like switch this around. Okay. So we can all do this. I can go through some different examples, but we want to now get into the art of using word magic. Okay.
I'm happy to share.
Does anyone have a term? And a term could be something like overwhelmed, tired, like uncomfortable, whatever. Sorry. What was that?
Stuck.
Stuck. Okay. So Charmaine said, I'm stuck. Let's go into some different terms she could say instead of that. All right. I'll let you guys go first, and then I've got a few I can think of right off the top of my head, so I'm ready to go. But Joel, what might she say instead of stuck?
I'm reevaluating the best way forward.
Love it. Love it. Love it. That is so good. You came right out of the gates with like such an amazing answer there. Chris, any thoughts?
When I'm feeling stuck, I just realized I haven't found the answer yet. And 3 more questions from now, I'll have the right answer.
You could just say, yeah, you could say, I'm in pursuit of the answer. Right? I love it. You could say, I'm preparing to take action. I'm storing my energy. I'm regrouping. I'm enjoying life while I get ready. I'm prioritizing. I'm staving the juicy stuff for later.
I'm recalibrating.
There you go. Do you like those options, Charmaine?
Yeah. Yet is one of my favorites. Exploring possibilities. And also, I mean, everything changes. Nothing stays the same. I think it's good to remind yourself that.
Yeah. Perfect example, by the way. Perfect example. All right. Who else has a term they want to throw out there? And it could be a term you are challenged with or somebody you know is challenged with. It doesn't even have to be yours. You can just throw it out there.
I'm so far behind.
That's a good one.
Perfect.
And that's just in reference to where I am in life right now. I remember my dad would say that to me a few times about, work, where my life is in general and stuff like that. And I am far behind, but also I realize I'm choosing my sacrifices. I'm sacrificing my career. I'm sacrificing my time. I'm sacrificing my adult life to be with him, to take care of him, to take care of another person I don't care about. And this is what my obligation is to the family.
Even sacrificing is kind of a tough word, though, because it's making you less, and I think you're making choices. You're choosing to give or you're choosing to help them in this time, right?
Yes.
You know what? First of all, Charmaine, you just totally ninja'd that. Like, did
Yes,
everyone knows what she did? Not only did she let him just share the one he's offering up, she actually went on, when he went 2 layers deep and used the term sacrificing, she's like, no, I'm choosing to, right? She made it like, I'm prioritizing it. It conveys greater strength. It's like you're doing a virtuous thing, Chris. Like, let's think of this like you're making the virtuous choice, right?
Yes.
Okay, so perfect. So Joel, do you have any thoughts? What might somebody say instead of I'm so far behind?
I'm pulling myself further back in the slingshot to launch forward.
Joel, you need to be writing fortune cookies. That's definitely a fortune cookie for sure.
Yeah. So you could also say, I haven't succeeded yet. Just using that term yet presupposes we will, right? You could say, I'm getting an education. I'm prioritizing. Right? Like lots of those terms could work. What else could you say, Chris? What do you think?
I could also say, instead of feeling so far behind, I'm actually building a strategy to move forward. I'm actually recalibrating and resetting. Not everybody's path is the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to say this in a pithy way, but a lot of times, you have all this stuff you think you have to do, but when push comes to shove, a lot of those things aren't really things that you have to do. They're not really needs. And you'd be surprised how many of them can fall off, as far as things you have to do. If you just focus on the ones that matter most, suddenly some of those others just fall away.
She brought up another brilliant point. Charmaine just nailed it. Like a lot of this can come down to unrealistic expectations. Like all your essentials, you're not really far behind if you think about essentials, right? Like we're just maybe we haven't achieved all of the excess stuff we want, but you might tell yourself, I'm exactly where I need to be right now. Right? I'm exactly where I need to be right now. I'm still here. I got all my needs met, right? Like there's a whole bunch, and I liked what you said, Chris. I'm building a strategy forward. Beautiful. So the art now comes in being a good parent or coach to ourselves. We need to help stop and correct ourselves when we recognize that we're telling ourselves things that weaken us and dampen our enthusiasm for handling life, right? Excellent example. All right. Anyone else want to throw another example out there?
Well, I just have one more thing to add to that. I think we appreciate the things that we've struggled with. So a lot of people, you may think they're further ahead in life, but if they didn't have those same struggles, they may not be appreciating the place they are in life in the way that you will whenever you're there.
Yeah. So I love that. And Charmaine is really saying that we could say this: I'm ahead in life where it really matters. I'm ahead in life because I know what really matters, and it's about the people that are important to me. I might be behind in the superficial measuring stick or whatever, but I'm ahead in life where it really matters. Love it. Love it. Let me throw another example at you guys that people might see. A lot of people say, I'm overwhelmed. Okay. We hear that all the time. And the minute somebody says they're overwhelmed, it's like if their level of overwhelm is here, when they tell themselves they're overwhelmed, it just, now the cup is overfloweth. You know what I'm saying? Like the minute they tell them that, it seems like it takes their stress up a notch just by telling themselves that. So what might we say instead of I'm overwhelmed? How might we encourage a better way of narrating that?
I need to change my scenery.
I'm being blessed with extra challenges.
I need to go for a walk.
This is an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And get stronger.
Yeah. I tell people, I say, you have such a full life. What a great challenge to have. Right. I heard one person describe it as I'm a busy bee, or my plate has a lot of food on it. Right. The term I use that's quick is I just say, I'm maximized. Just saying, instead of overwhelmed, I'm maximized. I love that. I love that one because when I've offered that one up to people, when I'm coaching them, people love that one because it does reflect that it kind of just encompasses so much to just say, I'm maximized. Any other thoughts on that? What we might say instead of overwhelmed?
It's a very timely one because that's one of the ones I had written down, and I think it's a common feeling. Yeah, any way to reframe that, I think, is beneficial because it's all really perspective and the way you look at it. The circumstances are still
being efficiency.
Yeah. So another one I hear all the time is, I'm tired. People go from I'm overwhelmed to I'm so tired. Just saying we're tired makes us feel more tired, doesn't it? Oh, so what might we say instead of I'm tired?
We can go back to recharging our batteries.
There you go. There you go. So you can say, look, you were maximized and now you're recharging. Perfect. It just puts life in such a much more encouraging perspective.
I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I really love a nap. And that gives me feelings of joy. Like I'm going to take a nap. So, I mean, it is recharging, but it's, it's not like about being tired. It's about recharging in that sense,
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes, if the framework is I'm tired, sometimes I won't try to like reframe it to a similar positive term. I'll just completely turn it on its head and be like, I'm energized right now, and just try to snap myself out of it rather than fix it in a way.
Yeah, you could do that too. Yeah. You just say, I'm turbocharged. The minute you say you're turbocharged, like it just gives a boost, doesn't it? It's just like, I'm so turbocharged right now. Oh my goodness. Right? Like it's
I'm just thinking about when you're a kid and you have to clean your room. We used to pretend we would take these speed pills. You take a pill and then you'd run around really fast and clean a bunch of stuff. That's what it's making me think of. Like supercharged pills.
You had a different challenge than I did.
Here's one that we hear a lot right now. We're in lockdown. Lockdown. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's 2022. And everybody says lock down, and it just makes it seem like we're just imprisoned when they tell themselves that. So how might we describe it in a way that's a little bit less discouraging?
We get to spend more quality time with the family.
Perfect. We're in extended family day for 2 years. This is the family day that lasted since 2020 to 2022. Is still continuing, right? Everyone liked it when it was 1 day a year. How about 2 years of family day?
Well, I think you want to see your space as cozy, right? And you're getting to enjoy your space, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They call it Family Groundhog Day.
There you go. There you go. You could also say we're in recovery mode because with less cars on the road, less emissions, the environment's recovering because a lot of things have slowed down. So you just say society is in recovery mode. Or you could say it's reflection mode because we're reflecting on what's really necessary. You know, like I've attended so many I've attended a Zoom wedding. I've attended a Zoom funeral, you know, like, and that's saved on gas, hotel, different things while still participating in a way like, you know, we're learning greater efficiencies in some ways, you might say, right?
I think the Zoom meetings made it that you could attend these important things more frequently and still have the flexibility of your schedule. You can still experience these family events and still have the flexibility of your schedule and also enjoy time with your family and still have control over your time.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you're not spending time traveling. You're not blocking out an entire week to go somewhere.
Well, I think it also taught us how to spend time with each other. I know
It
my
forced
dad.
us to spend time with each other.
No, well, yes, but I was trying to say something a little different.
I know.
But like my dad has a number of siblings and we moved away whenever I was really young. And so we didn't live close to them. And, you know, so they would have phone calls and stuff when we were kids every now and then, but they weren't really able to get together. But since everybody started doing the Zoom, my dad and his siblings have started meeting on Zoom once a month. They never did that before the pandemic. And they would only get together. You know, my parents would go out every other Christmas and every other summer when I was growing up. But there's like one other sibling that lives somewhere else. We weren't always there at the same time. So it's given them a way to find consistency in the time that they meet together that they didn't actually have before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it. Now, does anyone else have any terms you want to throw out there that we could all kind of tackle?
I have one that I'm not sure on it, but feeling unfulfilled. Like there's a lot of times these days that I get distracted by stuff that doesn't matter. And I think that sometimes what's most fulfilling is when we focus on contribution and growth and things beyond ourselves. And so sometimes when you measure where things are falling short, it'd be good to find a way to reframe that in a positive way.
Okay. So instead of unfulfilled, we might say, I'm searching. Right? Because it puts the emphasis on learning and evolving, right? So that might be one. Charmaine, any thoughts on I'm unfulfilled?
You know, it's without saying searching, it's hard, but you're looking for new ways to grow. It gives you a chance to kind of reflect and find what's really important to you, what really matters. I heard this thing today, something about like, we shouldn't say that we're searching for happiness in life because, you know, if you had a sick child and they were in the hospital, you know, you wouldn't not go to the hospital because it doesn't make you happy. You're really searching for the things that matter and you want to show up for the things that matter. So if you're feeling unfulfilled, it gives you a chance to really reflect on what really matters to you. And maybe chasing what matters is the goal.
I'm evaluating what's most important in life.
Yeah.
You could
Or I'm
say
learning to focus on what means something to me, that kind of thing.
preparing to act, discovering, questioning, searching. Those are all really good terms for it. Unfulfilled kind of gives it that like end state. It's like an ends. We want to focus to a means, right? So you see what we're saying? Like searching, discovering, questioning, preparing. Like that's what we want to do, because then it's a means. We're not at the end point.
You're still
Right.
working on the light bulb.
Yeah. Chris, any thoughts on that one?
If I'm feeling unfulfilled, I am eating empty calories. Meaning if I'm feeling unfulfilled, it means I'm not filling something that is more meaningful. Meaning I need to choose I need to focus on something that will make me feel fulfilled, or work towards something that will make me feel fulfilled. So just where you are right now is feeling unfulfilled. So you need to find another direction towards something that does make you fulfilled.
This is a little side tangent, but have you guys seen Hector in the Search for Happiness?
Yes, that was so good.
I have not.
Yeah.
Where is that?
It's on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it.
Cool.
Simon Pegg.
No
Ooh, I love
kidding.
him.
Me too. That
Brendan,
was the whole reason I watched it.
Brendan, you'd really love it.
All right. I really like him. I really like him. So I think what Chris said was a really good point. He kind of said in a way, I'm aware. Instead of I'm unfulfilled, I'm aware.
Mhm.
Right? Like that's a plus. That's a positive, not a negative. Right? Perfect. What about if somebody said, I'm really, let's think of something that's kind of really,
I have one more to throw in when you get a chance.
throw it in. Let's go after it. It might even be what I was going to bring
All
up.
right.
Anyway.
Okay. Another one I say to myself sometimes, I don't have to worry about being happy I don't have to worry about happiness and money. And because really what I'm saying is, because of my current situation, I'm never going to have those two things. So why am I going to really focus on it or go after it?
With a why bother attitude.
Yes.
I got it. Nothing's going to change unless you decide to change,
And
Yeah.
that's
So
very true. And that's what I'm starting to do. I am starting to change. This new identity, the new work that has come into my life, I think has helped me give some contrast to these things. But again, I think when I'm focusing on my personal life, I think that is where I'm receiving the most amount of pain right now.
okay. So it's kind of really what you're telling yourself is I'm hopeless. That's what we're saying. This is actually a reflection of hopelessness. Why bother? Right? I'm
Yes.
hopeless, or it's hopeless.
Absolutely.
So I would say this. I'm going to give you one. Instead of saying it's hopeless, you could just say, I'm experiencing fierce grace.
Fierce grace.
And it brings in that life is happening for us and that there's no accidents in the universe. I'm experiencing some pretty fierce grace right now.
Which also means you're really cared for.
Yeah.
No, I'm really caring for others.
I also like the idea we don't really know what the future holds, but we know things are changing, and as long as we're changing, there's that anticipation that something good is out there.
Yes.
The future's not really written.
No, and the future will grow at its own rate.
Yeah.
So the future's not here now, but the future is sprouting.
Listen to you.
There you go. You might also think of it like this. This could be interpreted as a thwarted desire, personally.
Yep.
So you might even describe
Absolutely.
this as I'm over loving.
I am over loving.
Yeah, you could describe it as I'm over loving. That's what's going on right now, and I'm experiencing that.
Although over loving presupposes that it's too much, so maybe I'm exceptionally loving.
I have a master's degree in loving.
There you go. Absolutely. Does that help, Chris? Any more you guys want to
Yes,
throw
it
at this
does.
one? Perfect. So there's a whole bunch of different terms we could use in case it comes up. You could say from, like I'm confused to I'm curious. Instead of disgusted, you were surprised. Instead of embarrassed, you're aware. Instead of instead of guilty, you're preparing to act. Because I've had that come up. Instead of insecure, I'm questioning. Instead of lazy, I'm storing energy, right? Instead of I'm nervous, I'm energized, right? Instead of tragedy, you could call it an unwelcome surprise, right? So those are some different things we could do. Now, let's go into spotting others on exaggerated metaphors. Here's the thing, people will use a metaphor. And what we want to do, the way we can help is to step in to interrupt it, get literal on it to prove it to be false, then tone it down with a reasonable truth. So I'm going to give you a couple examples and then maybe I'll give you two examples and then we'll go into a third one together. So somebody could say, oh, my coworker stabbed me in the back. They got that job promotion that I wanted to get. Okay. So I would say, okay, yeah. Can you show me the knife and the actual wound? Okay. So I'm getting literal in it with it. And they'll be like, no. And you could be like, well, and they might be like, you know what I mean? And I'd be like, no, nobody stabbed you in the back. Don't tell yourself that because it's not true and it'll take away your power. And then I would just tone it down to the reasonable truth. You just didn't get what you wanted. That's all. Nobody stabbed you in the back. You just didn't get what you wanted. Somebody else got it. That's all that happened. That's all. Right? Don't tell yourself things like you got stabbed in the back because you'll never get the life you want if you keep weakening yourself like that. So that'd be an example. So I'll go into a different one. Somebody might say, oh, so-and-so didn't invite me to their wedding. So basically they ripped my heart out and they stomped on it. Okay. And then I'd be like, okay, well, show me the scar in your rib cage where they must have ripped your heart out. Because, and how, first of all, how are you feeling okay right now? How are you even alive if they actually ripped your heart out, right? So you're getting literal to prove it to be false and ridiculous. And then just say, don't tell yourself that because it's a lie. It's an actual lie. It's not true. It's a lie. And if you tell yourself that, you're going to weaken yourself. They just didn't invite you. That's all that happened. They didn't rip your heart out. They didn't stomp on it. They just didn't invite you. They probably didn't have enough capacity. That's all. That's all that happened. You just didn't get an invite. That's it. That's all. Life goes on. You can do something else that day. But do not tell yourself somebody ripped out your heart and stomped on it because you're going to take away all your power. You're going to weaken yourself. You'll never get the life you really want. Okay. All right. Let's go into the third one now. I'll get you guys to help me out with this one. How about this? They basically put a gun to my head and made me do it. If somebody says they basically put a gun to my head and made me do it. So we're going to say this. Here's this hypothetical situation. Husband is on a vacation with the wife and they attend a timeshare presentation and they sign up for $15,000 worth of timeshare. And they say, they put a gun to my head and made me do it, as a way to kind of get all worked up. So how would you address this?
Anytime I hear basically, I'm thinking you've translated this and you've redefined it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I tell people. What really happened? You're saying basically, so you're translating what really happened.
There you go. You could just say, nobody put a gun to your head. What really happened? Right?
What caliber was the gun?
Yeah. Should we call the cops? This sounds like a crime. Yeah. Right? So we might get very little with that. And then how might we tone it down to the reasonable truth? How might you relay it back to them in a very reasonable, sensible way?
Perhaps you were excited and jumped on something that sounded entertaining.
Yeah. They just got you overexcited. They didn't put a gun to your head. They just gave you some uncomfortable pressure. Right? That's all. To inspire you to make a choice.
They showed you what effective marketing looks like.
There you go. So that might be how we address this. Now let's talk about, and then I would just say, look, don't tell yourself those things that are untrue. It takes away your power. If you keep weakening yourself, you'll never get the life you really want. I hit them with that always. It's like, get literal, tone it down, remind them why it's a bad idea to do that. Right?
Put that in the chat. That's just such a ninja process. Because it's like, even just saying it, it takes your power away. It's not making a judgment against them. It's telling about this thing that could happen if they don't do what they should be doing. And who wants to lose their power? Like, that's a really,
and then people need to understand that. So that's the, I think I just threw it into the, there we go. Step in, get literal to prove it to be false, tone it down to the reasonable truth, remind them why it's a bad idea to do that. Okay. Now let's talk about how to use all of this moving forward. So ideas to use all of this moving forward. Now that we've gone into word magic, why it matters, how it shows up, how we can be better. What are some ideas and how we can use this moving forward? Who wants to go first? You can also include key takeaways at this point if you like.
Well, that's going to be one of my questions. We talked about at the beginning how to pre-qualify if somebody would be receptive, but how would you, I don't know, I guess how do you snap them out of it if they're, well, maybe that just presupposes that you find the right time to tell them.
Well, okay, so if you're preparing somebody, you want to show good intent. First of all, Joel, I'm here to help. I'm here to help. I understand why you might feel this way. Are you open to a few thoughts on how you might be able to improve matters? I might just lead in with that. Show good intent. I'm here to help. Validate them. I can understand why you feel that way. If I told myself I'd be stabbed in the back, I'd feel like I'm being stabbed in the back, right? Do you want to feel better or do you want to stay in your situation? Because if you want to feel miserable, that's okay too. That's an education in misery. And if you get comfortable enough and familiar with it, maybe you'll decide you don't want to be miserable anymore, but maybe you just need to get to that point. That's fine. People are like, fruit on a tree, and they have to be ripe to fall. They have to be ripe for change. And suffering is that ripening factor. People have to suffer before they hit that point where they're willing to consider different possibilities for how they live their life. But they're in the middle of an experiment right now. So we just want to make sure, hey, are you done with this experiment on how to create misery and make yourself feel terrible? Because if you're done with that experiment, that failure method, I've got another experiment you can try. It's called empowering yourself. Here's how you do it. Don't say this, say this. This is truthful, that's a lie. This gives you power, that takes it away. That's simple, right? So good point.
Also, what's also good about your last offer is like permission marketing. You're asking for permission to help this person. This person may not be ready for help. They may not be in too much pain that they cannot receive your message, even though you give it, even though it's helpful and productive. They just not be ready for it. So asking for permission from that person to help them also validates that you're also honoring their boundaries.
Absolutely, absolutely. We want to know that they're actually receptive, because one of the things that happens is when you give people help and they're not ready, you might actually make them more resistant to that advice in future, because now they have their memory of that advice and how hearing it did not help matters. They will not have the awareness to know that the reason it didn't help was they didn't follow it. They'll just be like, oh, I've heard that before. That's usually what people do. They'll just say, oh, I've heard that before. And then they'll dismiss it because they've already heard it. However, if they hear it and it's new and they're receptive, they're more likely to take it in. So we might actually screw people up if we give them advice before they're ready. That's basically what it comes down to. Perfect. So I think one of the things is we can always just pay attention to what we tell ourselves on the inside. It's not just what we tell ourselves on the outside. Pay attention to what you tell yourself in your own head. Take out a thesaurus and find better words for what you're using. Find good word substitutes. Notice how changing one key word can instantly change the way you feel. I'm enraged to, I'm really tickled about this. It can make a big difference, right? Be a metaphor detective. Stop and replace your metaphors. If you just say, oh man, I keep hitting a wall in relationships. You can just think, I keep hitting a wall, but I can climb over it. I can go around it. I can break through it, right? Start to adjust some of those metaphors. Ask for spotters. Ask for people who will call you out and help you correct yourself when you use this kind of language. So somebody could just say, look, Joel, are you angry, as you say, or are you just a little peeved? Because you like that word, right? And really, when you go peeved, it just sounds ridiculous. But it snaps us out of that.
With the hand gesture.
Yeah, peeved. Right? Like it's just like it's ridiculous. That word just makes me laugh. Right? Spot other people if you can. Spend time in good company. This cannot be understated. You pick up the language patterns of people you surround yourself with. But if you surround yourself with good people and you use their words, their volume, their tonality, their intensity, you might find that you start to take on their emotional patterns too, right? So you might want to just consider that, just surrounding yourself with good company. I think really what this comes down to is we all narrate our reality and we create what we experience through word. Okay. That's why, Don Miguel Ruiz in the 4 Agreements talks about be impeccable with your word. Tony Robbins talks about transformational vocabulary in Awaken the Giant Within. This subject has been spoken about so much, right? When you choose better words, you choose a better reality for yourself. You literally create reality with the words you use. And we have the ability to change this stuff and to improve it. We have the ability to improve reality by improving the language we use. So that's why this is magic, right? Word magic. In fact, in spelling, the first 4 words are spell, because that's really what our words do to us. They can enchant us, they can empower us, they can disempower us. So we want to be able to use this kind of wisdom moving forward in order to create some good spells, in order to break us out of some spells of suffering we might not know we're under using this kind of language. So let's go into some key takeaways and how we might use this moving forward. Chris, why don't you start? What are some key takeaways from tonight?
Well, one key takeaway is, one thing I will share is when using those simile, one way of breaking people of the similes is you can remind them that it helps them create wrong models. That when they're using that model to express their emotions, it may not fit exactly what's going on with them, and it might actually project it incorrectly or inaccurately, not to themselves. So maybe it's not as painful as they are portraying it, but because they're using a model of extreme pain, it becomes extreme pain, even though it really isn't. So using the wrong models it will make this more difficult for that person to be able to process. So that's one thing you can express to them, and that might help break part of the spell, because if they realize the model is incorrect, that they might choose a more manageable model to express themselves.
Or even more than realizing it's incorrect, realizing the joy or happiness that comes from alternative ways of looking at things.
Yes, so you pick a happier model to express yourself, or a more pleasurable model.
Sometimes when they say things like that, especially similes, I'm like, well, what does that really mean? Because they're picking these words out, but can you translate it for this situation? What do you really mean by that? And once they're forced to go in and explain it, it changes the language.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I'll give you an example, and this is brilliant, Chris. A model might be that I've created this yardstick for where I'm supposed to be in life. I haven't achieved, the relationship, the job, whatever that I think I should have by this point in life. Therefore, I'm behind, right? A different model, and I've thrown this quote into the chat, might be, in the words of Asha Tyson, my journey has molded me for the greater good, and it was exactly what it needed to be. I haven't lost time. There is no shortcutting to life. It took each and every situation I've encountered to bring me to the now, and now is right on time. Different model. And
Yes.
that gives us hope and courage and enthusiasm, right?
Happiness will present itself in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a really good one. There you just knocked it out of the park. Excellent. I mean, we don't
And that's
like
one of the things
movies.
I've had to adjust to.
We don't like movies when we can predict how it's going to turn out. If we're like, oh, I knew the hero was going to say that, and we don't like that. It's more exciting when we don't know how it's all going to turn out in the end. And I think the same goes for life. I think life is more exciting when we don't know how it's all going to turn out in the end. Yet the ending tends to be good. And if it's not a good ending, it's not the ending. There you go.
It's not ended until you decided it's ended.
Excellent.
You just have to keep it.
Perfect. So, Charmaine, key takeaways for you.
Well, I think learning to pick up on keywords in language sometimes is really helpful to me. Like, I know you were mentioning before, the situation basically is this, or when I say always or never, those are keywords. Nothing's ever always or never, all or nothing, that kind of thing. And I know I've got a friend that we kind of talk through these things, and he'll always remind me it's not always or never, or, you just say never. And then it's gotten to the point where when I start saying something and I say those words, okay, I know I just said never, and it's never always or never. And you start talking yourself through it. And the more habitual you can be about that, especially if you have someone you can kind of talk through those things with, and the more you feedback each other, kind of like what you were saying, having someone you can do that with, the more it helps you change your language and change the way that you approach things. So for me, recognizing those keywords and calling myself on it, or having someone that helps catch me on that, is really good for redirecting my thought patterns.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And always and never. And I usually find it's some sort of a thwarted desire in there. And it's just like, look, I'm hopefully anticipating that this will be easier or different than it's shaping out to be right now. Right? Like I'm hopefully anticipating. Love it. Love it. Well said. Joel, over to you. Key takeaways.
There you go.
I was on mute. I'm back. Okay. I think we're on Joel now. Joel, what's some of your key takeaways from tonight?
We're not recording again. Oh, there we go.
Oh, we're recording again. All right. So, Joel, key takeaways from tonight.
Keep takeaways just to pay attention more to how I talk to myself. Because sometimes, fixing it presupposes that you tune in to listen to it. So it just would be to really be aware of how I talk to myself. And then it's, once I notice that, it's easier for me to change that, because obviously you've given us plenty of tools. And the other takeaway would be to really think about it in terms, as I mentioned, having 3 kids, there's, I've noticed, 1 or 2 of the kids do tend to jump, 8 or 10-year-olds tend to jump to like these worst case scenarios when something's really not that bad, and just using that as an additional tool to reframe things, to be like, oh, is it really that, or could it be this maybe?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's actually really funny. I forget the name of the movie. It was kind of like a war movie, and there was this group, and they had these like young girls that were in like that had been abducted, and they're trying to get away from the bad guys, and they have to jump off this cliff into the water, and the girls are afraid because they think, oh, sure death and everything else. And then like the lady who the army general lady is just like, look, it's just air and it's just water. That's all it is. That's all these things are. It's just air and it's just water. And she was able to like talk them down. I'm like, I feel like you talked me down. If I'm there and I'm them, I'd be like, that worked. Like you literally just got literal with it, and it just kind of like brought me back to a safe place. Anyway, yeah, you're right. This is word magic. It plays a key role in all of our lives, and it's timeless. classic challenge we all have. The key is to actually pay attention to this dynamic, notice it's happening, make a sincere effort to improve on it, because improving on this will improve us in all things: health, relationships, the joyful experience of life. Like that's a big return on investment for dedicating a little bit of our effort and focus. And I think it's worthwhile for us all to make that investment. So nothing but honor and respect for all of you in sharing your wisdom with everybody who might watch this recording in future, and for anyone who has joined us and virtually participated with us. This is our gift of love and wisdom that we send to you, whoever you are. We're very familiar with the human experience and all the difficult and confusing emotions and thoughts we all go through, and we're all here to team up and work together. Just consider us friends you haven't met yet. So, oh, and Chris has another comment. Words change brain chemicals and emotions and body cells. Yeah. Your psychology becomes your physiology, right? That's how lie detectors work. They can measure you use words and your thought, it affects like everything, right? So, Joel, why don't you hang on after we do Go Team, and I'll catch up with you for a second. And then the rest of us, let's do Go Team on 3. Fist bump and we're out. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Go Team!
Go team! Go